you're new in town or just new to this whole podcast thing, you're tuning in to Law by Night, the podcast that discusses all things vampiric with no fear of breaching the Masquerade. In this episode, we continue to unravel the mysteries behind the origins, motives, and cultures of the 13 vampiric legacies in the world of darkness. This episode will focus on the Gluttons of the Ebony Kingdom, the Ishtarri. It would be fair to assume that all the Labon, the kindred of the Ebony Kingdom, claim they originate somewhere in Africa. They are all rather proud or humble about this fact, as I am sure you can imagine. There is one legacy, however, who are very proud that they do not originate from Africa, but the Middle East. This legacy is called the Ishtarri, and just because they revel in their origins, it does not mean they don't try to blend in, as we shall soon explore. As you may have worked out, the Ishtarri have taken their name from Ishtar, the Babylonian goddess of love, who you also remember as a potential name for the Toreador Antediluvian. Whether you like it or not, the Ishtarri are seen as a Toreador offshoot, but with some interesting quirks that make them far more insular yet expressive than the Divas. But to understand that and how the Toreadors would end up in the Ebony Kingdom, one must start at the beginning, which has us revise what we know of the Toreador Antediluvian. As you may remember, Cainite scholars have spent many nights fighting over the name of said antediluvian. Some texts would suggest that the antediluvian was Ishtar, the bull dancer who entranced Enoch with her grace and bravery, whilst other texts suggest that she is actually a he. Most scholars of the night, and kindred in general actually, will refer to her as Arakel, who was said to be a radiant sculptor. I am entitled to believe that Arakel may well have been athletic and artistic, as one does not exclude the other, as you would be a fool to believe otherwise. For the purposes of our discussion, I will assume that Arakel was in fact a female, as that is the most accepted theory concerning her estrogen and testosterone balance. Enoch and his father Cain ruled the Fair City, Ubar, during a time where Cainites and Cain lived in relative harmony. Enoch was captivated by Arakel and her twin brother, whose name has been lost to time. Arakel would paint and sculpt Enoch, whilst Enoch would discuss poetry and philosophy with the twin. I like to believe that this twin was Malkav, as art has often been closely stalked by madness, but you can believe what you wish. Enoch would embrace both of them, against Cain's wishes. Cain decided that his descendants, Enoch, Irad, Zillah, and other second-generation Cainites, were unable to sire anymore. They listened for a time. The deluge, otherwise known as the Great Flood, would wash away the city of Ubar. Cain interpreted this as another punishment from God and sought to hide away from humanity. The third generation was left with their sires, 12 of which wanted to embrace their own chowder. When the second generation said no, the third generation did so anyway, rising up and destroying their vampiric makers. Cain would return here and had seen his chowder destroyed, punishing the antediluvian with the clan curses that would be passed down from chowder to chowder. The one remaining antediluvian was Arakel, who ran, taking the taste of human beauty with her, which became a clan weakness in its own right. The clan of the Rose is just as much of a prisoner of their artistic vision and sensitivity as they are its inheritors. They are often overcome by the beauty they see around them and become immobilized with fascination. Some are repulsed by less beautiful surroundings. This of course varies from Toreador to Toreador. After all, how does one define art? It is a question both Toreador and Ishtarri would obsess over, as you will soon learn. Arakel travelled the world engaging combat with the Gangrel Antediluvian, a woman known as Honoria or Enkidu depending on who you ask, and doing her best to avoid her cousins in the process. She would sire Minos, the Kenocrate, who would be diabolized by one of his chowder, Helena, one of the more powerful and infamous Methuselahs active in the modern Knights. Arakel would settle in Mycenae, in Greece, seeking affection from King Amphion, his kingdom and 14 children. As smitten as he was with her, Arakel's mastery of the presence discipline did not work as it is intended to, as he refused to leave his children. Arakel, not taking rejection so well, embraced him anyway and slaughtered his children. Just like the kindred before them, the many Methuselahs would fight amongst themselves for power. Arakel would flee once more, with more and more Toreador populating each nation, all toughened by their experiences. There is evidence to suggest that Tanit, a child of Arakel who was embraced for her beauty, was in a relationship with Troil, the Bruja progenitor. This is only worth mentioning, for it would explain where the rebels learned their art of shaping emotion. In Rome, the Toreadors began to form their relationship with the Vendru, only because the Vendru didn't see them as a threat to their power. Both clans are also natural masters of manipulation and each picked up on the other's flaws. The Toreadors encouraged the joys and splendours of beauty, art and architecture, whilst the Vendru encouraged infrastructure in all manifestations of the form. The efforts of the Blue Bloods and Perverts made Rome the centre of culture and learning. That is not to say that they always saw eye to eye, as the Vendru became obsessed with the rivalry against the Bruja, resulting in the War of Carthage, which the Toreador wanted no part of. Such obsession meant that the kindred paid little attention to the rise of a little cult that would be Christianity, burning away much of their progress and our kind. The Vendru were stubborn though, as they remained in Rome, whilst many of the Toreador expanded once more, claiming the Byzantium and a lot of Africa as their own, some holding onto the name Toreador, while most began to adapt to the culture of the Liabon, taking on the name Ishtarri, assuming that is indeed what happened. The Ishtarri have much in common with the Clan of the Rose, so much so that it can be difficult to tell the two breeds of vampire apart. Sure, the Ishtarri have strong ties to the Middle East, many of which possessing jet black hair and golden skin, but they, like the Toreadors, are known for embracing beautiful kind, finding them just irresistible. Naturally, many are just striking to look at. Of course, not all of them are into looking fabulous or a pretty painting. Again, art is subjective and completely infinite. I am told that some live in harem-style quarters that are self-indulgent, extravagant havens that are far out there when compared to the locals. Some fill their homes with statues and sculptures of physical beauty, while some want something more cerebral in nature. But the main difference between the Toreador and Ishtarri clan weakness is the word vice, not art. This difference connects them more with the Ravnos. As a reminder, the Ravnos are drawn to a vice of sorts and must fight an overwhelming temptation to ignore it. This weakness, the clan bane of the Ishtarri, is a combination of the Toreador and Ravnos clan weakness. Their vices are things that are both physical and self-indulgent, which is why you may hear the Ishtarri referred to as Gluttons. They are easily addicted to their all-consuming needs and they are driven to fulfill these desires at the cost of everything else. These addictions manifest themselves physically and their bodies betray the vice. For example, I have read tales of many Ishtarri elders growing incredibly fat as they refuse to change with the times, or younger Ishtarri who are just off their heads like a rabid junkie, making themselves the centre of any attention as and when they can. That said, they know better to outshine the Guruhi as the other self-centered outsider legacy. They requested a place in the domain of the Guruhi and they agreed. It is not immediately obvious as to why they agreed, given what I have just described to you, but one would assume that the Guruhi saw great potential in their self-indulgent natures. Should an Ishtarri embrace a political ruler or a master spy, and they will be near unstoppable at advancing the legacy motives. And those were not two weird improvised examples. The Ishtarri know the usefulness of espionage and the power that wields. They will merrily embrace any visitor to the continent that can maintain ties to the Western world, spreading the influence of the Liabon across the world. I know this as a fact, as I had gained quite a few enemies in Zimbabwe and I was followed back to London by an Ancile Ishtarri who underestimated the potency of, well, potence. But you needn't worry about her, or the bastard who sent her for that matter. We came to a little agreement where she would teach me her understanding in presence and, in return, would endure a quick final death via the Amaranth. But I digress. The Guruhi probably saw that the Ishtarri are the legacy who are the most alive of all the Liabon, for they are the ones most in touch with mortal society, like the Toreador pretends to be everywhere else in the world. Like the Guruhi, the Ishtarri have made themselves such an important part of Liabon society that it would simply fall apart without them. They can be scholarly sentinels on all matters mortal, acting as strong advisors for the Magi, the princes of the Ebony Kingdom. Of course, they can be too fixated for the kind sometimes if their obsessions are not kept in check, which they usually aren't. gods. The Ishtarri can also adopt more than just Ishtar's name, as they have been known to be strong warlords and warriors despite their gluttonous nature. An obese Ishtarri can still move at lightning speed with celerity, whilst an anorexic one can still endure a shocking blow to the gut with fortitude, and with their mastery over presence, it is near impossible to refuse their gluttonous charm. These are points that may seem to underestimate the versatility of the Gluttons, which is probably why most Legacies seem to get on with them, leaving them in their self-induced trances. The Ishtarri prefer this, as the element of surprise is often a profitable endeavour in vampiric society. This being said, they appreciate the stories of the Akananse, valuing their immense wisdom. Their positive association with the Guruhi also puts them in a relative allegiance with the Shango and Ozebo. What isn't so well known, or rather not often shared, is the relationship they have with the followers of Set. Both Legacies are strong outsider natives. They have been known to cooperate with the Zidundu, the Ishtarri, much to the dismay of the Guruhi. They pay no mind to the travelling Kinyonyi and pay less attention to the monstrous Naglabas. Whilst not being the most unified of the Legacies, you can see as to why the Ishtarri are arguably one of the more important Legacies, perhaps the most important Legacy depending on who you were to ask. They have willingly ingrained themselves with the mortals of Africa, as well as spreading small amounts of it to those in the West as well. They may not have the royalty and dominance over Livon society like the Guruhi, but their influence is arguably much stronger than that of the kings. That is what the Ishtarri want, and there is nothing they intend to do to change this. They have a great compulsion like no other breed of kindred to constantly gorge themselves on the self-gratification of embedding themselves with the mortals, feeding their own egos, lusts and desires. However, the Gluttons can barely control themselves. It does not take long for want to become desire, and less time for a desire to become an obsession. With more and more Westerners introducing new ways of thinking and behaving, there are more ways for the Ishtarri to lose themselves. And this need to feel good about themselves and get the same kick night after night, pretending to be immortal, will ultimately be their downfall. To be kept updated, follow the Lore by Night VTM Twitter and Instagram pages to find out when we will upload each episode. You can also find out by subscribing to the YouTube channel and clicking on the little bell, as you'll be immediately notified when the latest episode is live. Until next time, farewell.